It's time to take your business to the next level, the boss level. These are the premier business owner strategies and successes being utilized by the industry's top talent today. Rock your business like a boss, a VO boss. Now let's welcome your host, Ganguzza.
Hey everyone, welcome to the VO Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Ganguzza, and I'm coming to you live from a brand spanking new vocal booth to go, a 4x6, one of the biggest that I've stood in to date. It is amazing, and I want to give a big shout out and thank you to my good friend and booth builder, Tim Tippett, for bringing this to me and setting it up for me, and also a big shout out to Jeff, owner of Vocal Booth to Go. You guys can sound like a boss, like I do, in this Vocal Booth to Go. And you can save 5% on any product by using the code VOTechGuru-5. Thanks so much to Tim Tippett for that. And Jeff, thanks guys. You are amazing. And thanks for helping to sponsor this episode. Okay, on with the episode. Super excited, guys, to be here with third-time VO Boss special guest, more than a lawyer, Mr. Rob Siglampaglia. Thank you so much for joining us again for this very special podcast on something that I think the voiceover community has had a multitude of questions on, when we really just need to get someone's expert advice, and who better than Rob Siglampaglia, who is more than just a lawyer. Rob is a certified workers' compensation specialist, a national top 100 trial lawyer, a national top 10 personal injury lawyer, a super lawyer, well, we all knew that, right, since 2009, and a superb 10.0 rated AVVO lawyer. And not only that, he is a voice artist, actor, and director. Rob, I think you are in a Super Bowl commercial that is that not in a contest now?
It was. It was
for being one of the best?
It was on CBS Greatest Commercials. It's been on like a bunch of times.
Wow.
It was number 7 this year. So.
And last but not least, the Amazon #1 best-selling author of Voiceover Legal. Guys, if you have not taken a look at that book, it's an amazing resource. I'll give you some more information on that at the end of the show. Rob, thank you so much for being here with me today and answering all of these important questions that I know a lot of bosses out there want to know the answer to.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about California's new AB-5 law. I think probably one of the biggest questions that I get over and over again in the forums is, can you just explain it to us in layman's terms? Like, what is AB-5 and how is it going to affect me and my voiceover business? Mm-hmm. How's that for a small question to begin with?
Absolutely. I mean, AB-5, the issues behind AB-5 are not new. They've been being litigated, been going on for years and years and years and years. Basically, what AB-5 deals with is an independent contractor versus an employee. I litigated a case back in 2009 that went to the Connecticut Supreme Court. It's called Rodriguez versus Ed Construction. And that was the issue. In workers' comp, it happens a lot where a worker gets injured on the job, and are they an independent contractor or are they an employee and then covered under comp? That issue comes up all the time. So that was the issue in that case. Worker was determined to be an independent contractor, not an employee, so they weren't covered under comp. But there's a couple of tests that are under federal and state law to determine whether or not a worker is to be classified as an independent contractor or an employee. One of the tests is the famous ABC test.
Yes, that's what we keep hearing all about.
Right, and that's what AB-5 did. It made ABC the test that had to be used. The ABC test sometimes can be ambiguous. So there's other tests that evolved under the law. Like in Connecticut, the case of Hansen versus Transportation General became the test. If ABC didn't answer the question, you go to this test. And basically it's under Hansen is whether you had a right of control over the person, over the worker. If the employer or the hirer had the right to control that person in any way, then they would be considered an employee. That test under California law is the Borello test. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you've heard, people that have been following AB-5 know what the Borello test is. Mm-hmm. It's the same standard in Connecticut. You had the ABC test first. If you go through those steps and it's still ambiguous, it's still up in the air, you'd go to the next test, which in Connecticut was Hanson, and in California was Borello. So what happened was back in 2018, there was a case in California called Dynamex Operations West versus Superior Court. They were trying to figure out, was this driver an independent contractor, or was the driver an employee of the company? So they went through the ABC test, but they couldn't figure it out. So then they went to the Borello test, and they determined that under Borello there was not control because the person has right of their own schedule. They use their own car, that kind of stuff. So they determined that the person was independent contractor, right? The Supreme Court overturned it and said, no, you have to use ABC, and they determined that he was an employee. So that's what the Dynamex test did. And basically, let me just go over the ABC test really quick so everyone...
Yeah, that would be great, because what are the stipulations in the ABC test?
If a worker is hired by a company, right, they're either going to be classified as an employer or an independent contractor. Under the ABC test, there's 3 prongs, basically. One, is the worker free from control and direction of the hiring entity? So, basically, do they set their own schedule? Do they use their own tools? That kind of thing. Do they figure out how they're going to do the job? Like say it's a carpenter.
Right.
And the employer is not going to tell them, you need to put a nail there, that kind of thing.
What about a directed VO session, though? I know that's on everybody's minds.
Well, we'll get there in a second.
Okay.
So that's the first one. The second one, and this is the big one, the worker performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. And the worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as that involved in the work performed. So this is the big part of this test. This is where it's stringent. So what that means is I'm a roofer, okay? And I get hired by a roofing company to do work on a roof. What this says is because I'm a roofer and I'm in the same occupation as the roofing company, I'm an employee. That's what this says, ABC. So it doesn't matter if I show up on my own tools and at my own time, and I do the roof the way I want to do it without getting any control or direction, right? As long as I'm a roofer and a roofer company hires me under ABC, I'm considered an employee. All right, it's as simple as that. The ABC test.
Wow.
And that's what California codified, because that's what Dynamex said. Dynamex said you have to use the ABC test under this set of circumstances. So what they did is, because every single independent contractor versus employee issue is a question of fact, they're all different. There's nothing that's the same about them.
Right.
So what the legislature did in California, stupidly, was said everyone has to use the ABC test.
And that's it. No other tests.
That's what AB5, forget Borello, where you have to use the ABC. So basically what that comes down to, what it boils down to, is if someone's in the same occupation as the hirer, they're an employee. That's what it comes down to under the law. So for voiceover, let's go back to voiceovers.
Sure.
Because we'll answer your question. See, in my opinion, I don't think that AB5 applies to voiceover, because a voiceover artist is being hired by, a recording studio or an animation studio or somebody that's not in the same business. It's not a voiceover artist hiring another voiceover artist. If it was a voiceover artist hiring another voiceover artist, then that's where the ABC says they're in the same profession. They got to be considered an employee.
If it's a direct hire from a company or a production company that's hiring a voiceover artist, or let's say, what are some other what would be some other cases, really? A direct hire or a production company or...
Yeah, corporation.
Corporation.
That's in business of making books. And they're hiring a voiceover artist. Voiceover artist doesn't make books. We don't make books. We record. We're in a different profession. So under the ABC test, at least, I think a voiceover artist is not an employee. The problem is... they make it's so arbitrary that, there's penalties under the statute if you misclassify an employee. There's criminal provisions in there. There's big fines. The companies that are hiring just want to automatically say you're an employee. And that's kind of the way that it is for union voiceover artists. union voiceover artists they're hired as employees, and the taxes are taken out, and pension and health is paid. So that's kind of the norm. So it's really for the non-union jobs where non-union artists have companies set up and they're getting paid as an independent contractor. That's where it comes up more, although it does come up in union too. Because if a union artist has a loan out company or loan out corporation, they aren't necessarily being paid as an employee. It's kind of a hybrid thing because they're getting the health and the pension, but they're not getting, like, the wage would go through their company. So how does that apply under AB-5? Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know.
So there's all sorts of stipulations if you actually read, like, the examples. Like there's the 35 pieces exemption. Can you talk a little bit about those exemptions? Because I've got some questions that people are like, well, is this considered, is VO a fine art? I mean, is it exempt if it's a fine art? Talk a little bit about those exemptions.
Well, I mean, what they tried to do, a lot of these exemptions were already part of the law. Like attorneys or doctors or accountants,
other professions.
They were always considered independent contractors. Even if I went to work for a law firm, I could work as an independent contractor or I could work as an employee. So they're exempt.
So you as a lawyer could work for a law firm, and because they were exempt, written out in the law, right?
Correct.
You would be fine. Got it.
Real estate agents they've always been considered independent contractors, at least in Connecticut. I think in California too. In Connecticut, like newspaper delivery people were always like the paper boy.
Sure.
Always considered to be independent contractors, since the 40s. And I'm pretty sure that in California was the same way. So these are the exceptions that were carved out of the law. They were trying to codify those things and put it into the law. Fine artists are one of the things that they carved out as an exception to the employee independent contractor picture. So they're saying if you're a fine artist, you can be considered an independent contractor, just like me as an attorney.
Got it.
Is considered an independent contractor. So, but the question is, what's a fine artist?
Exactly. And I don't see a definition there.
They don't define it.
I know there's been a lot of upheaval in the state of California about this to get the law, modified or changed to add in more exceptions. So how is that process going to happen? Or how does that typically happen?
The whole bill needs to be rewritten so that it's clearer. And right now, it's causing a lot of fear.
Yes,
because of the
absolutely.
criminal parts, provisions. The assumption that I'm hearing is people are assuming right off the bat that the law makes somebody hire a worker as an employee. And that's not what the law says. That's not what it says at all. It says that you have to apply the ABC test to figure out if the worker is an employee. That's what the law says. So, but it's causing so much confusion that companies are just like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to have to go through the ABC test. You're an employee. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the end result. Which that's not what the law was. And that's not what this law was intended to do. It was just intended to codify the Dynamex case. It was for drivers, the Dynamex case. It was, people that drove cars like Lyft and Uber. And, they were carving out that exception. And that makes sense because, a driver is being hired by a company that owns some kind of car company, and it's the same profession. So that makes sense. That test makes sense in that case, but it does not make sense in our world, the voiceover
No,
world,
not at all. And I think
or
that
the acting world.
I think that a lot of people are afraid that, because of the confusion, that it's going to cause companies to just hire their own employees to do their voiceover versus hiring independent contractors.
I mean, all it really should do is that they should pay you as an employee versus paying you as a independent contractor.
Yeah, what would that entail? A lot more paperwork?
You'd have to do withholding. So say you're paying someone $100. You withhold half of the taxes from the employee's check. So it's like, say it's like $7, 7%. The other half you have to match. So like say you're paying 15%, $750 is coming out of their check, $750 is matched by me, and then I have to send that in to the state. So that's the procedure you have to go through. So not necessarily a lot more paperwork because you still have the 1099s
Just a
that you're
different
filing
procedure.
at the end of the year.
Right.
Right. It's just a different procedure. But I mean, the extra money, that whatever the extra money is on top of the wage, the $100, people might not be able to afford, or companies might not be able to afford,
Right.
small companies.
Right.
That could cause issues.
Now, is there something that we should have in our contracts to protect us from violating any stipulations from AB-5?
Unless we're hiring other voiceover talent, or we're hiring editors or things like that.
Right.
That's not our burden. Like, it's not our burden to do the ABC test. That's who the person that's hiring you.
That's hiring
their
us.
burden to do that ABC test. So
Okay.
there's really nothing we could do contractually unless we're hiring somebody. And if we're hiring an editor, they're clearly not in your profession. That's a different profession than voiceover artists. So you should
Right.
be able to still hire them as an independent contractor. But like I said, the law is so new, everyone's scared. They
Right.
think they have to hire those people as employees versus independent contractors.
And so for us as voice artists, we can hire outside marketers, personal assistants, social media managers without any fear of violating any sort of stipulation of this?
Even under the old law, it depends on how much control you're asserting over that individual. So say you're hiring a personal assistant and you want them to come to your office from 9 to 5, right? Then they're an employee because you're asserting control over that person.
Ah, got it.
So that would be that's the Borello test. That's the next test. So even though if they're not in your profession, like the ABC test says, you'd go on to the next test. You'd go on to the Borello test to determine that I'm asserting that much control over this person, so therefore they're going to be considered an employee.
So then stipulating, working 10 hours a week, how much control is that?
I mean, are you telling them exactly how you want things done? Do you want to say, I want you to do my books this exact way? Right? Then you're exerting control versus saying, here's my books, do this and give me a report or something like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like it depends on how much control you're taking over that individual.
And that's such a great
to get
area.
the job done.
That's such a great area.
Right.
Is it any benefit to us to have a business license, or does it not make any difference?
In California, you have to have a business license to run any business.
Yes.
So you need it, and the law. If you have a business license, then that's where you're going to be following the labor code and things like that. That's what you're saying when you're taking out the license. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you need it. Like
You
in
need
California.
it anyways. You need to be registered. Yeah.
Right.
and have a
Here in
business
other
license.
states, like in Connecticut, you don't have to do that to be a voiceover artist. You don't have to have a business license. So
Oh, so
every
good
state's
distinction.
different.
Yeah. Every state is different.
yeah, same thing with even though the what I'm talking about with AB-5, that's California specific. Every state has their own version. A lot of them are similar, and in fact, the ABC test was a federal test. So I think it was created by the IRS originally to determine, taxation, because that's really what it comes down to. If you're an independent contractor, you're paying all the taxes yourself, and if you're an employee, then the employee pays half of your withholding tax. That's the payroll tax.
Right.
That's the common name for it. So the IRS obviously have a big interest in making sure that employees are classified properly. So that's where it started, the ABC test. I mean, the IRS, and whether or not their employees are classified properly for tax purposes.
So I have another question about how does the contractor's location factor in? So, for example, I live in California, so this directly affects me. But if you're a VO talent in Nebraska and you book a job coming from California, how does that affect talent?
Again, it affects the person that's doing the hiring, because they're not allowed to classify someone as an independent contractor if they're in the same profession. They still need to do that ABC test.
Right.
So, that's how it's affected. It affects anyone they're hiring, even if they're from another state. The company really has to worry about people inside their own state. So like a company that's hiring a voiceover artist in California, that's who they really have to worry about, because that's where the authorities in California can come in and swoop down and audit and do all the penalties and stuff. If they're outside the state, it's in Nebraska, like you said, it's really a Nebraska law. If they have a labor dispute, it's going to be there in Nebraska. It's not going to be in California. So it really affects California employees / independent contractors more than it does
Right.
people
That makes sense.
outside the state.
How does it affect us if we work through an agency? How is that? The agency is our employer?
No, I mean, you mean like a talent agency?
Yeah, like a talent agency. If we get hired through a talent agency, they're the ones writing our check.
If you apply the ABC test to that, then they're not in the same profession. So you're an independent contractor. If you just simply apply that test.
Right.
That's where it's kind of clear under the ABC test, in my opinion, is that you're not in the same profession. So if you're not in the same profession, ABC says you could be considered an independent contractor.
Got it. So I feel like this has really cleared up a whole lot for me personally, because you have made it as simple as, there you go. I mean, you have to pass the ABC test, and it's as simple as that. So
Right.
I really appreciate you making that a little less confusing for all of us. So what do you see in the future happening to this? I mean, is there, are you seeing any sort of movement towards changing the legislation at all, or what do you think is going to happen?
Like I said, I litigated a case back in 2009. Well, it actually was litigated to the Supreme Court in 2009. I think I started that case in 2005. Okay,
Wow.
So you're talking about 15 years.
Yeah.
This has been being litigated. This is litigated every day, this issue, employee versus independent contractor. So this is just going to spur another whole set of cases on like, what's a fine artist?
Right.
That's going to
Exactly.
be a case. It goes to court. Okay, it's just going to spur on all kinds of litigation. That's will further define. So what they did was they took law that was kind of clear under case law, and they muddied it all up by trying to put a bright line test in a statute. So now all the complaining and all the people that are saying that they're losing things and losing money, all those people have cases that it's going to spur a whole bunch more of litigation, and it's going to define what the legal effect is. The courts are going to have to step in, and that's their job. The courts interpret the laws. The legislator makes them, the courts interpret them, and the executive branch enforces. So that's, those are the three branches of government. So,
Sure.
I mean, it's going to cause a lot of litigation. That's what it's going to do, unless they go back to the drawing board and clear up all these things. I mean, it's a futile effort anyway. Like, it's impossible to codify every single situation that can happen for an independent contractor versus employee. You can't. It's just there's so many factors involved with it. It's just hard to do it. The test was fine before. It was fine. It was like, are you in the same profession? Yes, I am. But I have zero control. I have zero control over that person. They come and go as they please. They use their own tools. They do use their own methods. I don't tell them what to do. Okay, then they're an independent contractor under Borello, right? So it was like the test was fine before.
But now it's just the ABC.
Now they took away that discretionary portion of it. And they kind of made it mandatory. If you're in the same profession, they're an employee. You got to pay up as an employee, which is not always the case. I mean, it's not. It's just not.
So then in reality if we're a voiceover artist and we're working for a company or a production company, it's simply not the same. We're not ever really producing voiceovers for another voiceover artist necessarily, or getting paid.
That's how I read this.
So
right.
it's as simple as that. Is it as simple as that? That's your final. Would that be your final word, like to tell us, don't worry so much?
Well, it should be as simple as that, but I'm telling you, the employers are the ones, like, we don't have to worry about it.
Right, it's the employers that are freaking out.
The employers are the ones that are hiring you. They're the ones that have to worry about it. So they're the ones that might not be as simple as that for them.
Sure. Another question would be, does working with a paymaster serve as a workaround?
Well, when you're working with a paymaster, if you're paying yourself, right, through the paymaster, then that's what they're doing. They're paying you as an employee. If you're being paid as an employee, then you're going to be in compliance with the law. If you're paying someone else through the paymaster, like when I do a film, I file under SAG, I have to pay the actors as employees. So I'll hire a paymaster to do all that paperwork for me. They do the paychecks, they do all the withholding, they file the taxes, they file with SAG, they do the pension and health, and then they just give me a bill and I pay it. Done. So, yeah, that puts me in compliance with AB-5 because I'm paying everyone as employees.
Got it.
And the paymaster does all the work for me. So, that's an easy way to be in compliance with AB-5, and pay people as employees, versus independent contractors, and you don't have to worry about it at all because you're paying them as employees. So it's it costs. They charge I think the paymasters charge I think they charge 10% of the final bill.
Okay.
And that makes every single person covered under comp.
Right.
And I don't have to get an extra workers' comp policy. So say it's $2,000. Say my bill for a film is $2,000. I'm paying $2,200 for their fee. Mm-hmm. So to cover everything, cover comp, cover all the paperwork. So then, it's well worth it.
Voice artists, hiring other voiceover artists for other things such as social media or that sort of thing, you should do something through a pay service.
No, if you're hiring another voice talent to do something not voice related. So if you're hiring someone to do marketing and they just happen to be a voice artist, that's not the ABC test because you're not hiring them
for
to do something in your
right.
in your customary profession. Now, if say a voiceover artist, I see this frequently in the audiobook world, like a voice talent will go to ACX and they'll get rights to a book and then they want to hire 3 or 4 other talent to do some of the voices in that book. Then I would say that meets the ABC test, so you should pay those other talent as employees versus independent contractors. So that's where it could be. That's where it could get a little hairy.
Got it. Okay.
Just go through a paymaster and you're golden, or go through a payroll company, Paychex or ADP, one of the traditional ones.
Got it. So what can we do? What can we do as voice artists to, I don't know, help our situations and help people feel more comfortable with hiring us?
From what I heard, some companies are making talent fill out a lot more paperwork. They come up with forms, to check off the box, with a whole bunch of questions about whether they're, the control and this, that, all the things we talked about.
Sure.
So that you may have more forms you have to fill in. As a voice talent, you can tell your potential hirer that we're not in the same profession, so don't worry about it. But that's really not,
sure.
You know what I mean?
That may or may not make them worry less.
Right. They're going to be like, okay, thanks. I'll talk to my lawyer. You know what I mean? And I know that lawyers are being more cautious now and giving more cautious advice now to their clients because this is so new and you really can't foresee what's going to happen under this law. The Department of Labor could go crazy and just start saying, yes, they have to be employees and that's how we read this, and start giving out fines. And right now, that's the real issue right now is no one knows. We don't know.
We don't know.
Well, like I said, back in the 40s, there was a case that said paper boys were not employees.
Right.
That was Connecticut. So how many years has it been going on? It was kind of clear under the law, and this muddies it. So a lot.
Thanks, California.
So no one. Well, it's not just. I mean, now I understand. Like Illinois is considering a bill, and New York's considering a bill, and they can do it a lot clearer. If they want to make. In fact, they can just do it with the existing law. Because if you think about it, Lyft drivers and Uber drivers, if they want them to be employees, that's all they have to say in the law. If you're being hired as a driver for a company that runs a driving service, they have to be employees. That's what the law has to say.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? They could do it a lot clearer.
Exactly. It could be that simple.
Right.
Sure.
They're trying to make this huge net to capture all, as many employees as they can, but it's not necessary. It's just not necessary. And I understand that people are classified as independent contractors every day that really should not be. They should be employees. But also there's enforcement, and that enforcement happens every day too. Like you have the labor areas in certain states where there's laborers looking for day work will hang out at a certain area, and contractors drive by and pick them up and hire them, and then they give them cash, right? They should be employees because that's like a classic. I mean, they should be paid with a check and have the taxes without not cash.
Yes, that should be.
And, be covered by comp and that stuff. So that's the abuse that the law is trying to correct. But it's just too wide of a net. It's capturing too many legitimate independent contractors, causing fear among people that are hiring them. So that's what has to be fixed.
Well, so the best advice you could give for us at this time would be?
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, that really shouldn't affect voiceover artists. The people that hire us are not in our profession. So unless, like I said, you're being hired by another voice talent, because that happens too. I know that some voice talent, hire other voice talent to, do multiple voices on a project or whatever that they're producing. So that could happen, but for the most part, that doesn't happen. That's
Right.
That's the minority. So I would say that there's really shouldn't be much that you have to change because of this law. So that's the problem. It's not up to us. There's you just have to go with the flow and
We'll just have to wait it out, and hopefully things
wait it
will
out and see what happens.
Yeah, hopefully things will be clarified or go back to the way they were.
There was nothing wrong with the way
there
that
really
it was
wasn't.
before.
It sounds to me like there wasn't anything wrong with the way it was. So,
Well,
wow.
the Dynamex case, the reason why it was litigated was because of the driver's issue. So that took care of it. It
Sure.
said if you're a driver, that you should be paid as an employee under the ABC test. So why the legislator took it the next step and
to the
made
next
it
step, yeah.
and to a statute, that still baffles me. I don't understand. It's not necessary.
Well, Rob, thanks so much for clarifying a lot of our questions. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see and hope that things clear up and the fear subsides a little bit here. And in our next interview, we'll be asking different questions, or it will be resolved and we can all just kind of go on, which I'm going to go on my merry way. So I hope all you bosses do the same, because like Rob said, there's really not a heck of a lot we can do right now about that. Just try to mitigate any fears that our employers would have in hiring us as independent contractors.
It's definitely going to evolve. There's going to be cases that are brought.
Yeah.
So as that happens, as soon as the first big case comes down, people will understand where the litigation's headed, and then people will be able to act accordingly. It's just a matter of time.
Wow. Well, thanks so much, Rob. I so appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day and explaining this in layman's terms and help make things a little bit more clear for all of us. And I hope to have you back again when all of this is cleared up.
That'd be great. If it just gets repealed, that would be the easiest way to clear it up and just go back to the way it was before.
We can have a different conversation. There you go.
If they want to, like I said, pass a law for drivers, go ahead.
Yes, exactly. Let's just pass the law for drivers and be done with it. There you go.
Yeah, that's what Dynamex did. So that if they really want to codify it, that's all they have to do.
Okay, bosses. With that said, go on and keep on being bosses. And big shout out to our sponsor, IPDTL. You too can network and connect like a boss. And find out more at IPDTL.com. You guys have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Join us next week for another edition of VO Boss with your host, Ann Ganguzza. And take your business to the next level. Sign up for our mailing list at voboss.com and receive exclusive content, industry revolutionizing tips and strategies, and new ways to rock your business like a boss. Redistribution with permission, coast-to-coast connectivity via IPDTL.